Social and trade union movements in Bolivia continue mobilizations as part of an indefinite general strike following the postponement of elections. The Russian president has announced the world's first COVID-19 vaccine has been approved for use. Egyptians headed to the polls this Tuesday in the first of 2 days of voting to elect a new Senate. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. And we begin in Bolivia, where social and trade union movements continue mobilizations as part of a general strike following the postponement of general elections. The protests, including marches, rallies and roadblocks, have been ongoing for 9 days. Protesters are calling for the resignation of the de facto regime of Janine Áñez, while rejecting the threats issued by the authorities to clear them from the streets. The movement is calling for the elections to be held as previously agreed on September 6, after the Electoral Tribunal postponed the vote until October 16th. The move was seen as yet another attempt by the de facto regime to cling on to power. And the Vice President of the Six Federations of the Tropics of Cochabamba organization, which represents Bolivian cocoa growers and others, has urged the de facto government to end the lies that it is spreading regarding demonstrators who are blocking highways.
Frente a las declaraciones del gobierno sobre...
We want to inform the public that the government is trying to mount a whole scheme to make the mobilized brothers look like criminals. In the game of being confronted or fighting or showing resistance to this. That is why we want to clarify to Bolivia that all ambulances and trucks carrying oxygen will be authorized to move freely in a responsible manner.
And the Bolivian de facto government minister has revealed his fascist tendencies on calling for protesters to be shot.
Go out there and shoot them all. That would be the right thing to do, the politically correct thing to do.
In Chile, the Public Defender's Office in the Araucanía region will request that the Supreme Court accept an appeal in favor of Mapuche political prisoner and spiritual leader Celestino Córdoba. The appeal comes as Córdoba reaches 100 days of a hunger strike and would allow him to serve the rest of his sentence at home. Mapuche activists are calling for the Chilean authorities to observe the International Labour Organization's Convention on Indigenous and Tribal Peoples, according to which the human rights of the Mapuche community should be respected. Talks between Mapuche leaders and the government have failed to reach an agreement, and several Mapuche political prisoners are facing death as they continue their hunger strike.
To the Mapuche nation and the indigenous peoples, to all the indigenous peoples, to all societies of the world, to all the peoples fighting for their spiritual beliefs, for their freedoms, for their territories, for their rights in dignifying their people, always in search of the full equilibrium of the natural order of our Mother Earth, which has favored all of us as human beings, and that sadly there has not yet been a greater awareness in appreciating her as she deserves. I'm very sorry that I have to deliver my last message to you in my last remaining days for my ultimate sacrifice. For me, it is a source of great pride to lay down my life for my Mapuche people, for our spiritual belief that is sacred above all and should never be renounced. And above all, because of my condition as Mashi, commanded by the spiritual world. So that my death come quicker, I'm ready to stop drinking any liquids at any moment, so that my death is not as low as state actors of all powers expect.
In Trinidad and Tobago, the ruling People's National Movement declared victory in the general elections held on Monday. 1.1 million citizens were eligible to cast their vote in the 41 constituencies of the country in an extended voting process due to COVID-19 safety measures. National Congress Movement recognised the election results. Preliminary results showed the ruling People's National Movement won 22 of the 41 electoral seats, while the opposition United National Congress, led by former Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessera, won 19 seats. Prime Minister Keith Rowley has called on supporters not to take to the streets to celebrate the victory due to the risk posed by the coronavirus. On Tuesday, Cuban authorities provided an update on the epidemiological situation surrounding the novel coronavirus.
As a result of the analysis of these 4,054 samples, 47 people tested positive for COVID-19 in our country yesterday. Following this pattern of testing and diagnosis, 305,652 samples have been tested, and 3,093 people have been diagnosed with the disease.
And the National Director of Epidemiology at the Cuban Ministry of Public Health made reference to the number of people who have recovered from COVID-19.
Yesterday, there were 12 discharges. This number is not favorable compared to the number of cases admitted yesterday. These 12 discharges sum a total of 2,472 patients who have recovered from the disease. We are talking about 80% of confirmed cases.
And Dr. Duran also noted that the COVID-19 mortality rate in Cuba has fallen to 2.84%.
We do not have to regret the death of any person with the disease for 7 days. The death toll stands at 88 in our country. That makes the mortality rate in Cuba 2.84%. Note that with this behavior we have been decreasing from 3 to 2.84%.
And we'll be right back after this short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced on Tuesday that Russia has registered the world's first vaccine against the novel coronavirus. Putin said the vaccine is effective and provides immunity against the deadly virus, which has spread globally. So far, more than 20 countries have requested 1 billion doses of the vaccine. Meanwhile, Putin insisted the vaccination in Russia should only be carried out on a voluntary basis. He also revealed that one of his daughters has already been vaccinated. With over 700,000 deaths attributed to the pandemic and over 20 million cases confirmed worldwide, a vaccine is urgently required. According to reports, the Russian vaccine will be distributed internationally by January 2021.
As far as I know, this morning, for the first time in the world, a vaccine against the new coronavirus was registered, and it is quite effective. It gives sustainable immunity. I know this very well too, because one of my daughters had herself such a vaccination. In this sense, she took part in the experiment. What counts most is for us to be able to ensure the unconditional safety of the use of this vaccine and its efficiency in the future. I hope that this will be accomplished.
Mexico's Foreign Secretary stated on Tuesday that the government has agreements with 3 companies to carry out advanced clinical trials for potential COVID-19 vaccines in Mexico this fall.
Regarding the vaccine for COVID-19, I can inform you of good news today. We have an understanding with 3 different companies, one from the United States, 2 from China. It's called understanding because it's a memoranda of understanding. The objective is that what is called Phase 3 of the clinical protocol of these vaccines or possible vaccines is carried out in Mexico. This is very good news because there are 3 Phase 3 protocols for every advanced projects, which is what President López Obrador is concerned about, that we have it, a vaccine for COVID-19 on time.
According to data provided by Johns Hopkins University, more than 20 million COVID-19 cases have now been confirmed worldwide. The global death toll stands at over 740,000. The most affected country by the pandemic continues to be the United States, with more than 5.2 million confirmed cases. The US is followed by Brazil, with over 3 million cases confirmed. India is the 3rd most affected nation, with nearly 2.3 million infections, followed by Russia and South Africa, with nearly 900,000 and over 560,000 cases respectively. The Pan American Health Organization has warned that the COVID-19 pandemic increases the risk of death from mosquito-borne diseases, which are widespread in the region, since it has limited the response capacity of health services.
Diseases spread by mosquitoes are widespread in our region. And since our collective ability to monitor viruses and pathogens has also been impacted by the pandemic, we are also concerned about falling behind on these diseases. We've also seen that reporting of mosquito-borne diseases like malaria is down more than 40%. And there has been also an observed reduction in the number of people getting tested. So we know that this data really do not tell the full story.
The British and French immigration ministers held talks in Paris on Tuesday to discuss migrants crossing the Channel, as some UK politicians accuse France of not doing enough to stop boats leaving its shores. Britain's Conservative government has criticised France amid a surge in the number of migrants crossing the Channel during recent warm summer weather. Meanwhile, French authorities are trying to tackle the people smugglers who profit from trafficking migrants, announcing that 70 migrants were detained near Calais. In August alone, more than 600 migrants have arrived in the UK from France, including 235 in a single day. Last month, the UK and France agreed to set up a joint intelligence unit to expand their intelligence cooperation on people smuggling networks. The Turkish government announced that it will continue gas exploration in disputed waters in the eastern Mediterranean this Tuesday and warned that it will defend Turkey's maritime rights without concessions. Tensions between Turkey and Greece rose this Monday over the resumption of Turkish gas exploration between its southern coast in Antalya province and the disputed territory of Cyprus. Greek authorities have urged Turkey to cease exploration in areas it considers to be within its jurisdiction and accused the Turkish government of undermining peace and security in the region. Ankara claims that a large area of the eastern Mediterranean belongs to Turkey's exclusive economic zone, arguing that the Greek islands cannot serve as a basis for delimiting the Greek exclusive economic zone, a position challenged by Athens and the European Union. And Greece's foreign minister has called for an emergency meeting of the European Union's Foreign Affairs Council as Turkey vowed to press ahead with energy exploration in the eastern Mediterranean Sea.
The request comes at a time when there is a clear Turkish threat to peace and security in the eastern Mediterranean. Greece and Cyprus, despite our country's commitment to dialogue on the basis of the rules of international law and the law of the sea, a commitment which we are repeating now, Turkey has decided to indulge in its familiar delinquency. It proved once again that its statements about readiness for dialogue were insincere and misleading.
According to the Ministry of Trade and Industry, Singapore's GDP fell by a record 13.2% year-on-year in the second quarter of 2020. Low economic performance in the first half of the year had prompted the Ministry of Trade and Industry to estimate a fall of 12.6%, but the revised government data revealed a lengthy path to recovery as the coronavirus pandemic dealt a major blow to Asia's trade-reliant economies. The country has been hit hard by the virus, remaining under lockdown for most of the second quarter to curb the spread of the virus. The government said it now expects GDP to contract by between 5 and 7% over the whole of 2020 versus its previous forecast for a 4 to 7% decline. The transport and tourism hub is facing the biggest downturn in its history. Now we have more news coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. 3 million people are eligible to vote. The previous upper house of the Egyptian parliament was abolished in a new constitution in 2014, but the new Senate Council was established as part of constitutional amendments approved in a referendum last year. The 300-seat council, unlike the House of Representatives, has no legislative powers and will have mainly an advisory role. 1/3 of the seats will be appointed by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. And on Tuesday, the only crossing between Egypt and the Gaza Strip reopened for 72 hours, allowing Palestinians who are studying or being treated in Egypt to return and others to leave the Strip for the first time since the coronavirus pandemic led to the closure of the crossing in March. The Rafah crossing, the only exit point not controlled by Israel, was closed as Palestinian authorities sought to prevent a major virus outbreak in the densely populated, blockaded and occupied territory, which has a weak medical infrastructure. The crossing was opened for 3 days in April, but only to allow Palestinians stranded abroad to return home. Gaza's Interior Ministry spokesman, Iyad al-Bassam, said that people who hold foreign passports, foreign residency permits, or have emergency medical needs would be allowed to leave. The head of infection control at Gaza's Health Ministry, Rami al-Abdallah, explained that everyone returning from Egypt would be placed in a dedicated quarantine facility for 3 weeks.
We fear that while in Egypt, we will contract the coronavirus in cars, buses, or during contact with the people. As for Gaza, everything is fine.
I got a permit, but I did not want to travel because of the spread of the virus. I do not want to contract it. I have an appointment with a doctor in Cairo, but due to the current situation, I cannot travel. I canceled my travel plans due to the fear of infection.
Politicians in Lebanon are focused on forming a new government in the wake of the devastating explosion in Beirut. The Lebanese cabinet was signed on Monday under pressure from protesters furious about the economic crisis and reported warnings regarding the storage of explosive materials in Beirut's port before last week's deadly explosion. President Michel Aoun asked outgoing Prime Minister Hassan Diab and his cabinet to remain in office as a caretaker government with limited powers until a new administration takes charge. And the recovery efforts continue in Beirut following the devastating explosion last week. According to authorities, the blast was fueled by more than 2,000 tons of ammonium nitrate that was stored at the port. At least 160 people were killed and more than 6,000 injured. And a memorial was held in Beirut for the victims of the massive explosion on Tuesday. The bells of the St. George Maronite Church rang out, while the Mohammed Al-Amin Mosque issued a call to prayer exactly 1 week after the blast. Crowds gathered in the port area to pay their respects as the names of the victims were displayed and read out as part of the ceremony. And Palestinians rallied in the West Bank city of Ramallah on Tuesday, calling for the European Union to pressure Israel to free a local leader of the global campaign to boycott Israel. Mahmoud Nawajah, coordinator of the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement in the occupied Palestinian territories, was arrested at his home in Ramallah on July 30th. Several human rights groups, including Amnesty International, have called for his release. More than 100 protesters gathered outside the German delegation office in Ramallah, urging the country, which currently holds the European body's rotating presidency, to pressure Israel on this matter. Malians took to the streets in the capital Bamako on Tuesday despite a rainfall and pleas from mediators to stay home to demand the resignation of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. The protesters, cited as a few thousand, assembled in a central square carrying placards bearing anti-government slogans. The gathering marks the first time the opposition June 5th movement has staged a protest since July 21st, when it declared a temporary truce in the ongoing mobilizations to push President Keïta out. South Africa has now reported a total of nearly 564,000 COVID-19 cases. According to Health Minister Sreveni Mkhize, over 3,700 new cases and 213 COVID-19 deaths were reported in the last 24 hours. The death toll now stands at 10,621. However, President Cyril Ramaphosa has noted that the national mortality rate remains at 1.6%, which is significantly lower than the global average. The French Prime Minister has vowed that justice will be served after the murders of 6 young French aid workers, as well as their driver and local guide, in an attack in Niger on Sunday.
The victims are civilians, young people engaged in humanitarian work, who were therefore working in the service of others, in a spirit of cooperation and closeness to the people of this country. I therefore extend my particular heartfelt condolences to their families, loved ones and colleagues. France, as the President of the Republic has said, will ensure that this heinous crime against our compatriots does not go unpunished.
Meanwhile, Nigerians have reacted to the killings in what was considered one of the safer parts of the country.
In light of the horror of the crime that has been committed, in light of the youth of those who were victims for the most part, I really think that the Nigerian authorities, together with the French and American authorities, targets. Young foreigners have been killed. May God help the authorities catch them and punish them.
And we've come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesoenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Teleso English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.
Los gobiernos latinoamericanos